everybody. Welcome to the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host, Posh.
I'm Pat.
And we're here and so excited to be with Jeni Britton Bauer, the founder of Jeni's Ice Cream. She's been doing this for what she told us now, 25 years. 25 years, that's crazy. And we're so excited to be here to share your story and hear from you about your journey and entrepreneurship in general and how what the plans are for the future for you. So thank you for being here with us.
It's so much fun to be with you guys today.
So I'll be honest, I've known about Jeni's Ice Cream for a long time, and I love ice cream, and I've loved Jeni's Ice Cream, from day one.
I think I had it at your house for the first time.
Yeah. We definitely have had it together. And then we heard your story on how I built this, which we thought was one of our favorite stories. And so, we're excited to be sitting down with you. So give us a kind of a background of, we know you grew up in Columbus, Ohio, you're still there. But tell us, what young Jeni was like, your academic career and how everything came to be.
Well, first of all, we have to go back to Peoria, Illinois, which is where I'm originally from.
Okay.
And so my childhood was spent in Peoria. I moved to Columbus when I was 12.
Okay.
So I consider myself a deep Midwesterner, and we do have a sort of culture there. It is that sort of culture of hard work. Really, nobody that I know in the Midwest would have called their company, named it after themselves.
Yeah.
So there's always that sort of slight blushing that happens when, in that, it's like calling it Jeni's was like a little bit hard for me. I come from a culture that's very quiet. We work and and there's that sort of community element to everything we do. But I was raised by, one of my grandmothers was an artist and an art teacher and an English teacher. I had sort of an intellectual grandfather. The two of them were known to have read every book in the library in Peoria, so they had to order out. They were wonderful people. They had 10 acres of forest land, and we built a cabin, a Thoreau-like cabin out there where my grandfather went out there. We had several dogs, and they would go run the forest. We had about 12 gardens out there. Wherever the sun would break through the trees, there would be a garden. And so depending on the year and what the canopy looked like, there would be gardens all over. My grandmother had a garden just for her favorite flower, gladiolas. So they were all over her house too. But we had root gardens, and we had we had tons of vines all over the forest. We had also wild things growing in the forest as well. So I was out there every weekend, and I think that my understanding of sense of smell comes from that place. So also spending time close to the ground when you're a kid, you smell the ground, right? Whether it's concrete. I don't know if you remember growing up, you had concrete sidewalks where you were growing up, but the smell of concrete
100%.
sidewalks is so big in my brain, like a piece of watermelon on a concrete sidewalk. But the forest was like that for me. So walking the paths of the forest, depending on the season, there was wood, and sometimes it was the ground was wet especially in the fall when there was decay happening, or when it was green, or when it was very humid and sticky. There was a creek that ran through the forest, and so it was like heaven on earth, honestly. When it was really cold there, the way the scent traveled through the forest was very interesting to me. We always had a campfire going. And so you could always find that in the, scent travels differently in cold. It's just faster and crisper. But we always, just the trees. Just the scents are so big to me. And I think that my sense of smell comes from there. And that's what ice cream making is about.
I feel like it's something that a lot of people maybe not take for granted, but don't really notice unless you're really in it, right? You just even we're from LA, and being in a place like LA, it's you don't really notice the smells around the city because it's not as...
It may not be very good.
Or that, exactly.
Such pleasant smells out of the river.
Exactly. So it's interesting.
No, it is. And when you get into food later, and I think that these things guide you to your career anyway. And I definitely think it guided me because I knew that I was very connected to my sense of smell, and I was using that in art. I studied art all my life, and then also, in college I studied both fine arts and art history before I quit to go make ice cream. But when I figured out that ice cream was all about scent. Even blueberries have scent. Strawberries are all about scent. The only thing you taste on your tongue are sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. And then you have texture on your tongue. So the strawberry texture and the strawberry, sweetness and tartness and a little bit of bitterness. But that thing that really identifies as a strawberry is the scent of the strawberries.
So, from a young age, what got you into art, and why did you ultimately decide that you wanted to study that when it came time to go to college?
Well, my grandmother got me into art. We were always doing these. My mother as well. And that wasn't her mother. That was my dad's mom. So, on both sides of the family, my mother was a graphic designer and just into art. She always did craft fairs and things like that. So that was super fun too. She would make, Christmas ornaments and then go set up at the, fair or whatever and sell them, which I always thought was so cool and fun. But but so I was always the art kid in school. I moved around every year too. So I only went to a couple schools twice, or for 2 years straight. So every year I was with a new group of people, new students. So I think I've always felt very comfortable in the art room, in the art classroom, which is funny because I think it's actually a lot like a kitchen. And so art classroom and the library, those are the two places that were always sort of the same, no matter what school I was in. The art teachers have this similar way of speaking, similar way of being and presenting in the world. Same with librarians. And so walking in a library, whether it was a school library or like a library in the neighborhood, those were the two places that were always constant for me.
Did you enjoy the moving around and, the constant change, it seems, or was it something that, now looking back, has had some sort of impact on you? Because I know a lot of people that move around and, they became socially, I don't want to say socially awkward, but they didn't have a lot of friends or there was no consistency in their social life. So that has a toll on them. Do you feel like that played any part in your life?
Well, it definitely did. And it's the only life I've had. So I'm always, I think that entrepreneurs, probably one of the traits of entrepreneurs is that you have to be okay being alone. And the reason is because nobody ever believes in what you think, what you believe in. And so you have to be okay breaking off from that and walking away and just being on your own island for long periods of time. And sometimes that means you can't even speak about your ideas because people will just sort of or they get annoyed by them or whatever, But I think that when you move around, I wasn't annoyed by it, even though I was also a deep introvert, very shy, very quiet kid. I don't remember it ever hurting to start a new school. I always felt like it was a new beginning. And
you were optimistic about it. You didn't feel like it was
not
go make
something
new friends
I tried
again.
to do. Yeah, it was just like
you didn't really think about it.
Yeah, no, never. I never did. And as a parent now, I would never do that to my child. But it was one of the greatest things that happened to me. I mean, I love the idea that when you're building your imagination of who you are and who you can be and what you can do now that maybe you didn't, maybe you shouldn't have done last year or didn't want to do last year, whatever. What's the future going to look like? So when I start a new school, I deeply imagine who I was going to be. It's all about vision, and what I was going to do differently now. And always it was about that tweaking forward. And that is who I am to my core now and always have been. But I think it comes from that place of constant refreshing of my surroundings and my friends and, and being able to rethink who I wanted to be.
I think there's a lot of pros and cons to it, and definitely one of the pros is that you build character and you don't you sort of rely on yourself, and a lot of times in creating this independent person out of yourself where you don't have to rely on other people. Because I feel like sometimes when you grow up around the same people for so long, you kind of get sucked into this bubble and whether it's the mindsets or whatever it might be, and it's really hard to break out of that. So
I have seen that with my own children. I've seen that even with my sister, who is much more of a sort of much more like that, with these sort of her friend group from a very long time ago that, and it's wonderful. And it's a great thing, but also there's it can be very judgmental almost in a weird way. It's unchanging. So if you change your hairstyle or whatever, people think that's really not you. I mean, I know that even with my daughter, when she goes to school, she's she's been with the same kids for a long time and she's only in 7th grade, but it's if you just change one thing, it's almost, you don't want to go to school because, everybody's going to be staring at you and everybody's got to have an opinion about it and whatever. Whereas for me, when I moved around a lot, I was I could do whatever I wanted to.
And nobody knows me. No one knows
me, and I can just change whatever I wanted. And so even though I wouldn't want that for my own kids, I don't know why. It must have been hard. But for me, I don't know. I just must have gotten used to it or something.
You said at 12 years old, you guys moved to Ohio. Was there any reason to move, or just...
Well, my mother got a job.
Okay.
Selling typesetting equipment, which is really funny because it's such a different world now. And it was these big systems that graphic designers would use. And so my dad followed her out. We all followed her out eventually. My dad worked for NCR, and that was back when they were still competing with IBM in the personal computer space. And he could work in Dayton where NCR was based. And so we all followed her out and we all did that. But I thought that Columbus... I've heard of San Francisco, I've heard of LA, I've heard of New York City, but I have never heard of Columbus. So I thought it was going to be this tiny little town. And I was coming from a town of less than 5,000 people. It was outside of Peoria, Illinois.
Right.
So, where the people, the school lunches included cinnamon rolls that were handmade by the grandmothers of the community. This is a great place. Yeah. But I thought it was going to be this small city. Well, I moved out there to a suburb of Columbus called Dublin. And I went to orientation for the new kid. And I walked in and all, 40 kids are sitting on the bleachers. And I'm like, oh, that's really nice. The whole class like came out to welcome me. And it turns out it was just the new kids of 7th grade that year.
Oh, wow.
40 kids just knew, and I'm like, okay. I was just like way out of I didn't know what to do.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like, were you, again, like, I guess, like, was that a lifestyle switch for you? Like, did you really feel like you were kind of, I guess, transforming as a person at that point? Or were you sort of just like, let's see what happens?
I did feel like, it's a tough time anyway for, middle school sucks,
Teenager.
Anyway. But, so it is a time of transformation anyway, but also like, I felt like I was in the big city, honestly. Like, Columbus had an incredible food scene there. We had some amazing chefs who were, old guard chefs there. And like, it was still that like 80s cuisine. It was cool. It was neat. I mean, so over the next few years, I mean, I felt like it was I still think it's an incredible city, but I mean, looking back, I think of it then and now, and I mean, it's just miles away from what it was. But
I remember when I was like finishing up, junior high school, I thought I was going to be a fireman, a doctor. I'm neither of those things now. But did you have any idea of what you wanted to do at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I would go into art. I thought I would, because
As an
I always knew
artist,
that I would
or-
need to be in charge of my own like life or something. I mean, I knew that I was, I definitely was doing entrepreneurship. I mean, I was definitely like starting little businesses, and I was, by 12 years old, I was ready to be a grown up. I was ready to be away from my family, my parents. They, they were sort of having their own struggles and whatever, and I just wanted to be out of it. And I was one of those kids that was ready to go get a job. I didn't want school anymore. I just wanted to go work. I mean, you think, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I think like, how could you think that at 12?
Yeah.
I thought that, I mean, yeah, and I think that 12 is a really cool age for girls, because I met a lot of, probably boys too, but like I met a lot of girls who are sort of like that. I was one of those kids. I was just grown up. I was ready to go. I had an old soul or whatever, and I just wanted to go.
Why do you think that was? Like, where did that come from? Was it
I don't know, maybe
because of
parents
like,
who were very young. I mean, my parents had me when they were both, I mean, my mom had just turned 22 weeks before she had me.
Yeah.
So they were really, really young, and maybe there's something about that. So you almost grow up thinking that, with this almost like more responsible than your parents sort of attitude. But, it might be, one of those like gifts, genetic gifts as well. Like I've just always needed to be on my own. I do not like to be under anyone else's authority, whether it's a parent or a teacher or a police officer. Like it does not matter.
I'm assuming you had a tough time like in school then, like at least like getting into high
I had
school.
a horrible time in school. I mean, it was it was cold sweats. I was threw up all the time in school. I hated it so much.
I feel like there's some
threw
bad
up on
memories are coming
teachers.
back.
Like I mean, it was bad. I did not like it at all. I did not like sitting at a desk, but I was also like very quiet and still. And so I wasn't
like
the
that
ADHD
rebel
kid who was like
going crazy.
I mean, I was a rebel. I would smoke cigarettes out the window by the time I was in high school, while the teacher was teaching. But but before then, I mean, that was probably my senior year in high school. So it was very much at the end. I was really done with it.
Senior year of high school is a
really didn't
fucking
care
year.
by
I mean, it's
there.
a waste
You
of
should just
time.
get rid of it completely.
No.
Yeah. If I ran for president, I would get rid of 12th grade in high school.
You would win.
100%.
You would win.
100%. So let's do it.
Yes.
So
No, it was
you go to college, art history, and obviously it's not really going well because you don't want to be under anyone's authority. You said that you always wanted to work. Were you working at the time? Did you get a
Yep,
job?
I did. I was, because I also had no business going to university. I mean,
And you were
my
at the
parents
Ohio
and my
State
family had
University?
like dissolved by then, and I was really on my own. And so that was So I wanted to do makeup for Star Trek. So like Star Trek Next Generation. So I was like, this was what I was going to pursue. I was going to come out to LA and go to this school or whatever. And that was like
Specifically for
what I was.
Star Trek.
Yes.
Yeah.
because I think because I wanted Picard to be my boss. I don't know. It's like that's what I was imagining it would be like.
I mean, it's good to like. I feel like a lot of college students don't have that focus. So if you're like, I know exactly.
Yes.
Not only do I want to do makeup, but I wanted to do.
I was
it for
super
Star
focused
Trek.
on a career. Like
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
this is what I want to do, and also doing what I wanted to do. So anyway, I was sort of figuring that out, and then I realized that I wanted to go to school and learn. I like learning. I like reading. I like absorbing information and whatever. So I got it. So I applied to Ohio State University. They declined, not so politely. It was just like, no thanks. I mean, like I did not do well, and I think in my graduating class of high school it was like 456 kids, and I graduated like 454th out of them. I mean, like it was not great, and I refused to take the SAT. Because I believe that it's not fair to this day. I think it's ridiculous. Yeah. So so they of course said no, thank you, and I wrote a letter on notebook paper in pencil.
College rule or wide rule?
And I don't even know. I think it was in a notebook. Like, I think I ripped it out of the notebook, folded it up, and sent it. And I was like, well, here's what I did in high school
Was
in
this
case
like
you
an
think I
appeal?
wasn't doing something.
Like your appeal letter?
Yeah. I was like, no, but I was actually doing stuff. And they let me in, which was amazing.
Wow.
And they let me in fall quarter,
Wow.
and all of that stuff. So that was really cool and like really
I would
great.
love to see that letter.
Me too. I have no idea
Oh,
where
you
it is
don't know
right
where
now.
oh
No
my
idea.
God.
No idea.
Yeah.
But I know that I wrote what I was doing.
Yeah.
Like I didn't get good grades, but I was also doing this. I was working like full time. I was learning stuff. Also my mother had a baby, and so I, lived in this like in like a basement, which I loved, but it was definitely like a 1920s townhouse basement with like, rocks.
Yeah.
And like, my brother who was a baby at the time, like sometimes slept with me. My mom had anemia, really bad, and couldn't get out of bed a lot. And so it was just us and my sister, and like, it was a lot. It was a lot. But I also, found time to do fun things and whatever. They work. I loved working at the pastry shop. But anyway, so they let me in, which was amazing. So it was different for me though. University was different for me because I didn't ever focus. It was art history. It was fine arts. But if there was a class on vampires, I could convince the person, even if it was like a graduate level class, to let me take it. And so I took a lot on the French Revolution. I took a lot on classics, Greek history, like some like Greek economic history, and I got straight A's.
Wow.
So like,
I think you did it the right
thing.
way, which is take classes that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Because the ones that you're not interested in, you're not going to do well at anyways.
You won't remember
None
anyway.
of them matter.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to remember. So
And
why
now
not
it's like
double down
having
on what you're
conversations.
exactly?
All of this has become ice cream. All of it has become a conversation over the counter. All of my art history, which is like comparative writing, you have to write and just so much in that. And it's very, it isn't, the study of aesthetics who people outside of art
Baroque,
history think.
Rococo.
It's about what was going on at the time and why and what these artists were seeing in front of them and how they were interpreting it. And so whereas history is like afterward what they decided to record, artists are recording what they're seeing in front of them and what they believe and what's going on. And so you have to like analyze that to find out what that is sometimes. But it's almost more real than what we study as history. But anyway, so it's a wonderful thing to study. But that has become like, this is how I do writing at work.
Yeah.
I still write the pints, that we have. It's a skill that I use every bit of it, of what I learned at Ohio State. And what's great about Ohio State is it's a massive university.
Yeah.
100,000 people there or something like that. So, you can really do whatever. I can't even imagine specializing because.
Yeah. Throughout this whole time, were you pretty dead set, like after college, you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to start your own business and be your own boss and that kind of stuff? Or did you have some other career path in mind? Like, I'm going to graduate with an art history degree and I'm going to, I don't know, go work in like museums?
I knew that I would be an entrepreneur. And one of the reasons, I had done this a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I just liked making stuff and selling it somewhere or whatever. But I knew because I worked at small businesses. So I worked for people who owned their business, whether it was a bakery or an ice cream shop, which was my first job. I worked for the people who owned it. And so seeing how they did it, as opposed to, I don't know, working at the mall or something like that. And so seeing what they went through, seeing that it was basically 18-hour a day job for the owners, and like I got that bug, that this is where they live.
I feel like a lot of people will be turned off in that situation. Like, oh my God, like they never sleep. Like they're just working 24/7. But for you, it was like, I want that. That's what you wanted.
I thought that if you love it that much, if you love it, or if it's a part of you, you want to spend that much time doing it versus like being almost like forced to show up at 9 and stay till 5.
Yeah, it's a drag for sure. I'm curious, when you were working at that ice cream shop early on, how old were you?
15.
Did you think that there was any chance that you would one day be the one owning an ice cream shop like that?
No, I didn't, because growing up in the Midwest, I loved sweets, desserts. Like we served cinnamon rolls before dinner in the Midwest. And so I loved all of them. And ice cream was something you just ate every single day at before bed or whatever. And then you'd also go out on Friday night and get it. So it was almost like a throwaway dessert. It was probably last on my list of things that I loved. All of the other desserts I liked more. I don't know why, or I thought I did or whatever. But so I didn't. I really didn't. I thought it was. But here's what I liked about ice cream, though, and the reason that I was so excited. I knew that my first job would be an ice cream shop. From the time I was 10, I knew that, and I don't know why I knew that there were. I didn't know that there's going to be one that I could walk to that would open, and I would be their first employee and all that. I didn't know any of that stuff. But I just knew that would be it. And the reason was because of the culture around ice cream. There's some that I loved so
There's like
much.
no negativity around ice
Yeah, and it's like that. Yeah, there's this I don't know what it is. It's like that like Americana or something like that. And And even though, and it's like that, not just in America, of course, either, but like
in Italy,
you know?
gelato. I mean, it's fun, right? Like,
Yeah.
you never get ice cream when you're sad. Well, maybe you do to make you happy, but
And you're always there,
the end
like-
result is happy.
Yeah, and you're there to get to know someone else better.
Right.
Like you're there to get
Right.
to learn about someone else, or you're, whatever, and even a little bit about yourself. I mean, I've been in the ice cream for so long now that I know that when you go to the ice cream shop, you almost always know what you're going to get before you go. But sometimes something will change your mind.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like I have a memory of every single time I got my mind changed.
Yeah.
The first time I had is sort of silly, but like jungle fruit, which was Baskin Robbins Big Flavor in 1984.
Oh, wow.
And it like stopped me in my tracks. It was like this like passion fruit flavor or something. It had like
You feel
every
like a different
fruit. I
human
don't even
being
know.
afterwards.
But,
You're like, oh, I thought I was a chocolate person, but I'm not anymore. Like,
yes,
I like,
or the first time you discover that bubblegum and ice cream is horrible.
Yeah.
But you had to have it. Like because it looked so good. But there are like those moments where like sometimes you'll change your mind, and that's like really fun too. But that it's that culture around ice cream that's so wonderful.
So you didn't go in. So after you left Ohio State University, or you dropped out, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't immediately go into the ice cream business. You went into the perfume business.
No, not really. I was thinking about at Ohio State, I had a friend who worked in the chemistry department. He would bring me little vials. He was French. Like I don't know if he was going into perfuming. I knew him a little bit, on campus or whatever. He would bring me little vials of scent, little chemical compounds or whatever. And I think it was that point, as like a 19-year-old, that I realized how connected I was to my sense of smell. And then it brought back all of the stuff from my childhood. And then it started to be like, can I use that in art? Can I tell stories through scent in art? And I was working on that. Can we put scent in a vessel and then that becomes the art? Not like an oil that you would wear or whatever, but like just the air that was scented. And that sort of, and it didn't work or whatever. But like, I was just like, how can this work? And then I was also making pastries at home because I'd worked at the pastry shop for a French family, and they were amazing. And all of the French-speaking people from Ohio State University would come in and smoke, camel filters and drink like, the darkest coffee and have amazing conversations, and like over a croissant or petit déjeuner or whatever. And like I just would like just listen in and like be a part of that. And I love that so much. So could I have a pastry shop? And like so I was thinking about like, well, what if could I use these French techniques? They would grow their own raspberries sometimes and bring them in, but like with American desserts that I grew up with. So like even like thinking like Barbie cakes, like or whatever, big American cakes with color and stuff like that. And then that led me to ice cream. And then I realized that ice cream is all about scent. And so then it was like pastry, telling stories and art and scent. That's that crossroads where those things come together. And because I had been exploring everything that interested me, I found that crossroads where like, holy cow, ice cream is not what I thought it was. And it's really not what anyone thinks it is. It's more than that. It's not about junk food. It's not about like big chunks and whatever. It's about the actual ice cream. Butterfat, which is the fat that's in milk, melts below body temperature. And I knew that because I had made a lot of croissants with butter. Right? And not all fats are like that. Some of them melt above body temperature, which means it'll never melt on your tongue. But you can load that up with scent, and then as soon as it hits your tongue, it volatilizes. Whether it's vanilla bean or fake vanilla or mint or strawberries or coffee, chocolate, teas and all of that stuff. Flowers. I mean, to this day, I work with so many flowers. But I mean, anyway, it's all about loading it up with scent, either through steeping it or by adding an ingredient, and then loading it in there and then like locking it in the freezing. And then as soon as it hits your tongue, it melts.
So you're working. You said you're working at the ice cream parlor. Is that right?
I worked there in high school, and then I quit to go to the French bakery, which was like across the parking lot.
So how did you, when you ultimately came back to ice cream, like, or I guess when you're in college, like, what was the moment where you decided I'm going to leave college and I'm going to do this, and what was that?
It was a moment. So actually, it's interesting because there are moments, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the first time I put, I had like this essential oil of cayenne, which doesn't have a scent at all. It's just a physical property of heat. It's just a distilled, the heat. And I mixed that into chocolate ice cream, mushed it into chocolate ice, already bought chocolate ice. I didn't even make the ice cream. And that was the moment I realized that like you can load all this stuff up. Immediately right after that, I made a rose petal ice cream. I just knew that like butterfat was this perfect carrier of scent, even though that didn't have a scent. But that moment changed the rest of my life. Like I was like, if I like, I projected, I telescoped out like what ice cream could be like. So I do like to think in terms of moments. And then the other moment was when I was in art class, and it was like a figure drawing class, and it was a 3-hour class, and this woman came in who was the model in that class, and I loved the class a lot. I mean, I always brought big paper with me, and like I like to draw very big because I think it's like the radius or whatever. But the model walked in, and it was one that I just couldn't draw. I didn't like drawing her. She was she's like very tall and very slender.
Yeah.
And I remember she had like hip bones, and I couldn't shade it. I can shade like round people.
Yeah.
But I can't shade the angles on this
I'm
very
gonna
tall
test you
one.
out after with me.
I know, right? So it was a 3-hour class, and I was like, I couldn't sit there. So it was portfolio week. It was a big week. I had all of my supplies there. I was sitting there getting ready to draw, and I just was like, I can't do this anymore, because I was thinking about ice cream, and I just was like, I just want to go home and make ice cream. And so I got up, kind of quietly walked behind everybody in the class and left everything there because I couldn't pack it up and just get out of there. I left everything there. This is like very expensive art supplies. And especially for a kid who doesn't have a family to fall back on, who's really alone in the world, who's relying on, grants and, whatever I can, some loans, but to get to do all of this, and then also working basically full time.
And you knew at that moment you're not coming back. That's it.
I knew I wasn't going back, and I left, and then I went and 6 months later opened a little shop in the farmers market making ice cream.
What was the company called?
It was called Scream, and that was in 1996.
And did you learn to make ice cream in 6 months? I mean, did you know anything about food and making ice cream?
I had been making ice cream at home. So once I like mushed the rose petal into vanilla and the cayenne. Once I started doing that, then I started to take my creme brulee recipe and make it into ice cream. Just on a small ice cream equipment. And so and it was too eggy, and I started working on that or whatever. But that was where that went. And I just started, and I thought I knew a lot about it. I mean, I thought this is gonna be great. And I realized, I opened the shop knowing nothing. I mean, I thought I knew everything.
When you were making like the ice cream before you even opened the shop, were you getting feedback? Like, were other people like around you, like your friends or family or whatever, trying your ice cream and telling you like really positive feedback, or was it just off of your own like taste that you're like, somebody's gonna want this? A lot of people are gonna want this.
No, it was definitely so. And that's why I love to encourage people now, because when we, if somebody has a passion, it is kind of on us as their friends and community to encourage those people. And a lot of times, we don't, right? Mm-hmm. But I had a friend group who was very encouraging. And so, it was like we'd go to a dinner party, or somebody would have a dinner party, and I was always bringing ice cream. Back then, they would call me the ice cream girl,
Yeah.
And like, so I'd always bring ice cream, and like everybody started, that I made, and people started getting used to that. And it was like a moment. So you'd have this big dinner, everybody, lots of wine or whatever. And at the end, the ice cream would come out, and it was like this moment of like reanimation. Like, everybody's kind of like in a coma after a big meal and a little wine or a lot of wine or whatever. And then the ice cream would come out, and everybody's like reaching across the table and giving people spoonfuls in their mouth. And literally. And like, because they had never had ice cream like that, you know? Like, I would have whatever it was, Lang Lang or Bulgarian Rose. I could explain the difference between that and, whatever. And like,
at the time, like, what was like out there? It was pretty much Baskin Robbins and like some other local.
Cold Stone was really on the rise.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were growing all over. Ben & Jerry's was still in a big heyday. I mean, Haagen-Dazs was still Haagen-Dazs. And really in terms of, ice cream shops, all of the mom and pop ice cream shops across the country, most of them were still in the Ben & Jerry's model. And so I think it's kind of interesting, because you see, it's like the family trees. There was like, everybody was kind of on the Ben & Jerry's family tree. You walk into like Whitefish, Montana, and I was there not long ago, and there was probably 10 or 15 years ago, actually. But there was one still there, you know what I mean? It was like this mom and pop shop that like had the sort of bubble letters in the clouds, and you know what I mean? And it's like, They sort of thought they were being like, they put their own spin on this sort of like, let's add big chunks to ice cream. And so now you see it's very different. It's about, storytelling through flavor and scent and ice cream or whatever. And that's in that sort of more like, and that's our model, our family tree.
Right.
You talked about moments in that 6 months of prep prior to opening the store. Was there a moment that you thought to yourself, this is going to work? Like, this is going to be big?
Well, before I opened Scream, I thought it was going to be the biggest. Like, I thought it was going to be huge. I thought it was like going to be, everybody, when you have an idea, it's like, you got to be your own, like your best, advocate
Best
or what
cheerleader,
champion, you know what I mean?
champion.
Oh, I thought it was going to be like crazy. Like people were going to go nuts for it. And of course no one did.
Really? So
how far like ahead did you think in terms of, okay, were you thinking like, okay, I'm going to build this one location. It's going to do really well. And then I'm going to build more locations. And that was kind of the ideal situation for you?
I didn't think that far ahead. I just thought, I thought I sort of like skipped all the details and went to like the big vision, which is like, hey, if Ben and Jerry's can have pints in grocery stores and shops, like I can do that.
So you were thinking back then, like actually packaging these things up and selling them in stores?
Yeah. I was thinking like, I've said probably these exact same words, like American ice cream is the best ice cream in the world. Sort of, this is my belief, that sort of hard pack ice cream. And when it's really, really well made, it's the best in the world. And I think I can set the standard for that. Like, I think I can. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and then what is that?
Mm.
But I had a lot. I had a lot to learn about what that actually is, and that, you know what I mean. It's easier to say. You get sort of, especially when you're 21 or 22 years old.
Far away, but like where you had worked, it wasn't. You hadn't seen that happen, right? It was mainly just like they were serving customers walking into their doors and that type of model, right?
Yeah.
Why did you decide to open your first store in Columbus? I know you were there, but why did you decide to open your first store around that area? And how did you even get the money or whatever to pay rent for this shop?
So the shop maybe cost $35,000 or $30,000. No, it was just like a little. It was like our ice cream machines, the ice cream dipping cabinets, the tables, and all the stuff that you need to do that or whatever. And so it was just it was like convince friends. But there was a friend that I'd been kind of partnering up with a lot, and so she and I decided her family had some money and they were going to let us borrow it. And so borrowed from her family and started this little shop. I worked it every day. She had another business, and it was great. I worked there for 4 years, 12 hours a day, had Mondays off, burned out in a huge way. Off? Yeah, well, the market was closed on Mondays. Oh, okay. So, and for part of the time it was closed on Sundays too, and then that changed. But yeah, so I basically was at the market all day long. So most of the time in the market, you're not busy. And so you walk around, talk to the other merchants, loiter, or just do whatever. Make ice cream, think about stuff, read an ice cream textbook, you know what I mean? So that ended up being, that time was really important to me. It became the foundation of everything we do because I learned from everybody in the market. So in that market, it's a beautiful old, it's like a 150, 200-year-old market, in public market, and it's the oldest one in the Midwest, continually operated. And so you've got this incredible cheese merchant who knows everything about, every cheese maker in America or the world. You know what I mean? You've got the wine merchant who's been doing this for 25 years and knows everything about wines. Just every, of course, there's the produce people. Of course, there are the farmers that come in every weekend. There's several bakers in the market doing different things. There's a chocolatier. There's a spice person. And so these people become your family. My family, they still are. They're my family. And like, I learned everything from them. And spending so much time with them. It was like the perfect place to be, to learn how to be an ice cream maker, to learn how to bring flavor forward. But also it was a great place to learn how to build a company as a community. And really, I think it was about learning how community supports each other and how community works, because I had not had that growing up. And so I learned about that at the market and how this sort of rising tide lifts all ships, how we all have to hold each other accountable, how we also have to like not prop other people up, but lift people up, pull people up sometimes with us. There's this whole dynamic of what a community is and does. And this under this roof in the market was like the perfect place for me to learn all of that stuff. It's still how we operate our business today.
Yeah. So here you are, like you open up your first like store location and you're learning obviously as you're going. What ended up happening and like what was like the biggest, I guess, challenge in that time?
Well, so at Scream, my big problem was that I just really didn't know what I was doing. So, I did start to learn how to make ice cream. I really started to get what that was all about. And by the end, I was making basically what we're making today. It's still tweaked and changed over time more, but like it was basically like what we're doing. But the problem really was that I still thought of myself, I think, a little bit as an artist. And so I was making whatever flavor I wanted to every day. And there was just no consistency. So if you fell in love with one of our flavors, and salty caramel was one of our first flavors from day one. And that was the flavor that we really got known for. And it was before anybody else did it in America. And it was like a mistake that I actually made. A French chef from the bakery had said that, he was from Brittany, said where he was from, in a very thick accent, he said the caramel is salty. And I thought he meant like Scandinavian licorice salty. But what he really meant to say is what I would have said is salted. It's like salted butter. There's a little pinch of salt. Well, in America, it's all salted. We don't differentiate a burnt sugar sauce from a salted caramel, right? Caramel is caramel, and then burnt sugar sauce is burnt sugar sauce, right? But in France, they do. And so I took it and ran with it. I thought it was this extra salty, like caramelized sugar. And so I started making that ice cream, and to this day, it's one of our top sellers. And it's just sugar caramelized over fire, and then it's a little extra sea salt. But anyway, you might fall in love with that flavor when you come in at Scream and bring all your friends back the next day to get it, and then I wouldn't have it. I still thought that was a good business idea, that people would come in just to see the theater of it, or whatever. And it wasn't really until I closed Scream and still thought that maybe I was, maybe they just didn't get it or something. It wasn't until I visited another business who was out of the reason that I was there. It was a coffee shop, and I was there for their orange scone, and they were out of it. And it was such a disappointment because it was the only reason I was there, and they didn't care. And speaking of moments, another moment for me was when I walked out of that coffee shop, and I was like, that's what I did to all the customers at Scream. I was disappointing every single one of them every day. And so in my mind, I was like, you have to create that craveable reason to return. That was the thing that I had not done, but that was the thing that this coffee shop had done, and they ran out of it, or they didn't care or whatever. But anyway, so that was I restructured the business plan. I started, writing another plan. So maybe 6 months after I closed Scream, I got busy on another plan. And then it was we're going to have 2 dipping cabinets. One where we have signature flavors that never change. So what we've got. All your favorites there. And I knew the flavors that everybody always asked for, even though I didn't, choose to have them at Scream, but I knew what they were. So we started with those, and we immediately out of the gate, we were like, this is what we're known for. This is what people come here for. I mean, even day one, when we didn't even have any customers yet, based on what had happened at Scream. And then there was another dipping cabinet for whatever whim we were on, whether it was seasons, pop culture, culinary trends, or, a farmer wanted to grow something for us and we wanted to make it.
For context, how old were you? Around what age were you when you closed down Scream? What were you
I was 26.
So you're 26, and you started this thing, and it ultimately didn't work out, or maybe it was not what you wanted it to be, and you closed it down. What was going through your mind, and why did you want to? I guess it sounds like you went back to the drawing board, and you were going to take a stab at it again, and do it again. What?
I wasn't going to. When I walked away from Scream, I was done. I mean, I had been there for every day. I thought I had tried my hardest. I thought I had exhausted all of my ideas. I had a business partner who didn't care about the business at all. She didn't want to invest in the business. I had different ideas than she did. It wasn't nothing was working out. At the time, though, we had started to get some regular customers who really loved what we were doing. And so even though I don't think we made enough money, I mean, I made $638 a month for all 4 years. That's what I lived off of. Walked everywhere.
So it was profiting a little bit. Business.
Yeah, I mean enough that I could take that home every month.
Yeah.
And buy a few new, ingredients or whatever. But I had a different way of thinking about it, and it was just too hard to work together, and we just were going separate directions. So I was really done, and I thought I'll go back to school and be an art teacher like my grandmother. And so I just walked out.
Coffee shop moment, yeah. What was different about the business plan? I mean, you said you worked 6 months, or not worked 6 months on it, but in that 6 months you had this new idea. It seems like you were reinvigorated by that moment of disappointing the customer, right? Of that feeling and the craving and the expectation of wanting something and not getting it. But what was different? And I assume you changed the name at that point, or
well, the name is really funny because there were a few things. There were a few things that were different. First of all, I everywhere I went. I mean, Columbus is a big city. It's 2 million people, but it's a small community too. Yeah. And they're the neighborhoods that I lived in where I knew a lot of people, because I walked to work down High Street every day. And so, hello. I mean, literally waving to everyone. Hey, Jenny. Hey, Jenny. People knew me. I knew them. I had pink hair. I was, kind of conspicuous. Yeah. And so it was really hard to hide after I closed Scream. And so people would buy our drinks when we were at a bar. People, at one point, somebody bought us dinner one time, and it just wouldn't let it die. And I remember when I went to get a job, I was like, I need to get a job where no one will find me. So that was when I went and made croissants in the back room of the bakery. I begged them to let me be the croissant maker, which was the hardest job I've ever had. But we made them from scratch every day. I made, hundreds upon hundreds of them. And I also worked in the young adult section of a library. Like literally, it was like the windowless back room while I was doing that, just to escape a little bit. But that was the thing. It was like the community wasn't going to let it die, which was really cool and like something that I valued very much. And so it was really hard for me to take it completely out of my soul. And so once I realized that problem, it was my back in. It was like that spark I needed to get back working on it. And from then it was like feverishly working on it every single night, the business plan, I learned how to use spreadsheets. I learned how to use Excel. I mean, minimally, but like enough to say, how many customers do I believe, based on my experience and my knowledge, how many real human beings do I believe will walk up to my counter and buy something every day? And so that was how I wrote my business plan. I think I can get 10 people, before 3:00. I think I can get 10 more people before 7, and it was like, well, if I do that, what if I add, 20% more, or whatever. And and then you start thinking, well, how can I make flavors based on the things that I know and then my knowledge and my expertise that maybe they love so much that I can entice people to come back more. Once you start looking at the numbers like that, you start playing with it. It actually really impacts your creativity, versus like thinking like you're the one that's important, you're the artist, you're the thing or whatever, So it was a totally different way of thinking about it. And when I opened Jeni's, it's funny too, because at Scream I had pink hair, I had vintage clothes, I had made my own aprons, or I used vintage aprons. But at Jeni's, it was always white aprons. I mean, I made them all a lot too. They were like heavy canvas aprons. I had hair that looked like my aunt. I mean, she's adorable, but like she's still my aunt. You know what I mean? I had like brown hair, cut it short. I mean, I took all emphasis off of me.
Yeah.
And put everything on the ice cream. I wore a white shirt every day. In fact, I wore that for 15 years. Wow. I wore a white shirt and an apron and black pants every day, like black corduroys and hiking boots. That was my outfit for probably 15 years.
It's the one thing that is really interesting to me is like in that period you went from Jeni, the artistic person, art focus, ice cream as, scented art, to somebody who was now in the business of ice cream, right? Like you became a businesswoman and you really started to look at things more holistically as to how this is going to survive, right? Was that a struggle for you to transition from that creative artist to more so that creative businesswoman? Or do you think that one resulted in the other?
I think, yeah. I mean, for me, I think it went back to community. I think I learned, in fact, I know this is what it was. I learned the value of relationships. I learned the value of lifting people up. And that that entrepreneurship is a two-way conversation. And so I actually differentiate now in my life business from entrepreneurship, because I really do think that most entrepreneurs that I know are community focused and people focused and passion focused, and finding that spot where like you find that that sweet spot, where that's something you want to do and you love is also something somebody else wants to do, and like you can figure out how to sort of continue to tweak that versus like business, which is like a bunch of like it's a structure of disciplines. It's HR, finance, marketing, all of that stuff that you can learn, but and it's all about money, and that's great. I love business too, but I think they're different. They work really well together. But anyway, I think for me it was community is the most beautiful thing that we that in the whole wide world, and like art only exists because community exists, right? Like I just realized that all great art that I know isn't focused on the artist. You know what I mean? And all great chefs too, great artwork, even music or whatever. It's focused on this other emotion that kind of lives between human beings, I feel like.
Right. Like it's the culture and behind the cultures of that community.
Yep.
That creates that puts forth that culture.
If you start from that place of love for someone else, like, and then create something based on the things that you know and your expertise, you get to a whole different place. And I think that for me, that was what it was about. It was about now, instead of creating the next ice cream that Jenny's going to put her name on, even though I ended up putting my name on, I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. It was about using the things that I knew to make something really beautiful that somebody else might love. And like listening very closely and watching expressions over the counter as people ate it. You know, so I'd make it, and then I got this, you know, I got to serve it for so many years. And so that time, you become like a sort of a Jedi. You start to get an intuition about what people like and why, and then motivation. And then you get sort of, I guess, the right to go off and do other things and you know, grow and do all the things that you're doing or you know, that we're doing.
So how long did that last? Like that one spot that you opened up?
It's still there.
Oh, it's still there. But like,
Okay.
just like before you started expanding into more locations and actually having products in stores, like at what point did that happen?
So we opened in 2002, and we opened our first shop outside of the market in 2007. Okay. 2006. And one of the reasons, well, actually the reason was we knew we would open outside the market at some point. But I knew when I opened Jeni's that I had to do my part in the market to bring customers to the market. Like everybody else in the market, you know, you have to get outside of the market and bring people down. You can't just wait for people to walk by because it's not enough. So I started selling to restaurants, chefs that wanted the ice creams. I started doing festivals, you know, or community festivals or whatever we had, fairs, getting out, doing like non-profits, supporting them.
And this
like
was with the Jeni's
and
brand,
stuff.
like when you were selling
Jeni's,
it to restaurant, they were serving Jeni's brand ice cream?
Yep. Yeah, so we would sell it just in our area. Yeah. And in 2004, we opened our website. So now we're shipping pints all over the country. But we didn't know that you actually have to have a whole different license to do that. So if you're a restaurant or an ice cream maker making ice cream behind your counter, serving it over the counter, ice cream, hamburgers, whatever you got, you're under the health department. In most cities, that's what it is. You get your city health department or your county health department or whatever.
When you're shipping.
But when you package it to be resold, now you're under the state ag and then even FDA after that. And so when you go over state lines and sell it, we just didn't know what we didn't know. And so our state agriculture department came to us, informed us that we were doing it wrong. They were awesome to work with, really helpful, really great, but gave us like a year.
Right.
You know, they didn't come in and say, you have to stop doing this. They said, these are your options. And great. And we worked it out. So then I had to open a bigger kitchen offsite. And I knew the sales in the market weren't going to be able to support that. So then it was like, well, let's open a store. It was the scariest thing we ever did. Yeah. We didn't think we were ready for it. We didn't think that we had enough customers. And we did. We opened a little shop in this wonderful neighborhood called Grandview right outside of downtown Columbus. And we had a line down the block and around the corner, and you know.
So I'm assuming at this point, like you had created a buzz around the community, like everyone knew pretty much Jeni's.
Yeah, and it's still social media. Yeah. You know, I still had a book where if somebody wanted a flavor that I had made last summer, I had to call them. Right. You know what I mean? And then Twitter starts, and like yeah.
The one story I want you to share, and I'm not sure if chronologically we're there yet or we've passed it, is you took this course. Was it at Penn State, if I'm not mistaken? When did that happen?
Well, the funny thing is, it actually happened after we closed Scream.
Okay.
Yeah. I had already signed up to take it.
Okay.
And so it was in January 2000. And and it was awesome.
It was an ice cream making course?
It's an ice cream making course. So Penn State has offered this course for a really long time.
Like
I don't
part
know,
of a culinary
decades.
program or something? Or
no, it's actually a science program. It's a dairy science program. So it's in the dairy
I think
department.
the Ben and Jerry guys had taken it, or the
Ben and Jerry's guys had taken it. And like basically the course is for people who maybe have food science degrees, but they're going to go run a factory that makes ice cream.
Got it.
And so you go and you learn all the math in ice cream. So it's very sort of standard commercial ice cream production stuff. At the time it was. And this is in 2000. So there's a lot of like men with mustache, you know, like the kind of like, you know, plant manager types. Yeah. And then there was me. We have a class picture, and it's really cute. It's really funny.
It's crazy to think that 2002 is 18 years ago now.
I know.
You know, so you said you were going to tell us why you called it Jeni's Ice Cream Bar. So why was it called Jeni's Ice Cream?
Well, because I wanted to call it something else, and I had a whole bunch of ideas. And so I was running it by all of my friends, and I also was nannying for a family, and they were going to invest in the company. I was really hopeful that they were going to give me the money.
Quid pro quo, I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Yeah, well, they were the only people I knew with money. Everybody else I knew was like in a band or like an artist or they owned a record store or whatever. Nobody else I knew had like money.
Yeah.
So I was nanny for this family, and I loved them deeply, and I still do. They're wonderful, But so I was running this stuff by people, and because we had called it Scream, but like, so the feedback I got was, no one even called it Scream. You were there every day. Everybody called it Jeni's, right? We all kind of knew it was Scream, but no one called it there. Let's go to Jeni's. That's what people say. And so now you're going to add a third name. Like, it's a small community, right? So you add a third name, and you lose everything that you had there, and you have to start that all over again, and nobody's going to even call it that. They're going to call it Jeni's because you're going to be there all the time anyway. And it was true. I was there for another 6 years. So that convinced me. I realized that it doesn't make any difference. You're right. Nobody's going to call it that. I remembered that people didn't call it Scream. They called it Jeni's. So I called it Jeni's Splendid Ice Creams. And it was like all the ice cream shops had like another word. And I was like, and I think Grater's Fine Ice Cream. It's another company in Ohio, or Ben and Jerry's Homemade, or whatever. So I was like, "What's my?
Splendid.
It's Splendid." I think maybe I got that from like the Splendid table or something. You know what I mean? Like, who knows? But so I did. I called it that, and I honestly, it was embarrassing for me to do that. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I was like, I didn't have any design work done. I went to Kinko's. I didn't have a computer, so I went to Kinko's. So, I had to rent the computer. I don't know if you ever had to do that, but like I spent so many hours there making like signs for the business and stuff like that. But
Before
anyway,
it was FedEx Kinko's,
yeah. But I was there, and I think it was like Times New Roman or like one of those fonts, and I wrote Jeni's and printed it out on the biggest paper that they had at the time. It's like and hung it up on like clips for the opening day. I mean, I had
that was your
this
banner,
is like
your sign.
That was it. You know what I mean? It was on white paper with like black industrial plastic clips hanging from this very high ceiling on chains that were already there when I moved in. I mean, I was very scrappy. But anyway, so I was standing there about a week and a half after we opened, and there was a pile of dishes like that looked at the Manhattan skyline. I mean, it was like buckets after bucket after bucket. We used to wash all of it. We never used disposable anything. So it was midnight. I was tired. I'd been there for like 2 weeks straight on my feet. My feet were so swollen. I was in pain. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to come back tomorrow and do this. Like, I don't have any customers for the first 3 hours anyway. So I'm just going to come back tomorrow and I'll finish this. It's not a big deal. Like, I'll go home, I'll go to sleep, I'll get good night's sleep, I'll be ready for tomorrow, and I'll attack this tomorrow. And I turned around, took off my apron, turned around and saw this dumb sign, this paper sign in like blowing in the like air conditioning or heat or whatever. And it said Jeni's Splendid Ice Creams. And it was like there was a light shining on it. And I was like, I cannot do that. So I put my apron back on and did all the dishes. And it has made every bit of difference. At Scream, it was different. I could disassociate myself with it a little bit. But at Jeni's, I never have been able to do that. And I think it really mattered. Like, I think it mattered. Maybe even to a fault or too much. You know what I mean?
You mentioned like 2004-ish, you had a website and you were selling direct
Well, the
to
Food
consumer?
Network was coming out.
Yeah.
And we'd always wanted to do a website. So we're like, we got to get our website open.
And you can like actually buy on the website and you
could
ship
buy
it
it.
to
Yeah. So we opened a web store. Yeah.
Wow. So that was like super early on in like the e-commerce like wave, I guess.
Yeah, which is why we're in LA, because our first customers were in New York City and LA.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
Yeah, I mean,
but that was what they were, and we've been growing in LA since. I mean, we've been trying to get out here with a store for a long time because it's our biggest shipping destination.
At what point did you start getting into like other stores, like Whole Foods? Like you're in Whole Foods, right? And like all the markets and stuff. Like when did
that is a very, very complex and very difficult business, grocery.
Yeah.
And so we worked for that for a decade. Honestly, I mean, we just got global with Whole Foods last year, but we've been working on it for a decade.
Yeah.
Like, it's not easy, and only a few of our flavors are there, but they're like the top ones, and it's awesome, and we're really proud of that. But
curious.
yeah, we started doing our wholesale in 2009, and that was awesome because that you never know when something's gonna just spark something, another moment. Dean and DeLuca had been in our stores; they had some connection with the L brands or the limited back then, and so something had happened, or they brought somebody in for their team, but we got put on Dean and DeLuca's shelves in New York, and that was the beginning of our.
And at that point,
grocery.
though, was Jeni's already like obviously when you have physical locations, you're mainly marketing and spreading the word out to that community, right? So they know they could physically come to your location, buy your ice cream. But in this case, you're in all these stores where you might not have a physical location nearby. How did you get was it like, did you feel like you were starting a new business at that point when it came to like spreading the word and
For grocery?
yeah, basically like so people could go to a Whole Foods or whatever and buy Jeni's ice cream, you know? That may not have
we've
heard
always
of
thought
it.
that was our responsibility. I think that when you get into grocery, you have to think that way. It's our responsibility to send people to the store to buy it, and it's not an easy thing to do. Social media makes it a lot easier, and it's still not easy to do. But yeah, we took that on as like that's trying to build community everywhere we go, and that it's never easy. So I'm on the road all the time. I would go and stand in stores. I mean, I was just actually over at the farm shop here in Brentwood, and there were two women selling something that was their a beautiful business or whatever. And I like bought everything because I've been there. You know what I mean? I've stood in so many grocery stores giving out samples and talking about our company, but you just get out it after it and like, pound the pavement the same way that I did, by working in the stores for so long. But, I also was at the time working in the kitchen every day. So I had there was a lot working in the stores, working in the kitchen, it was a lot going on. And also at the time, we weren't in Whole Foods, or we were just starting to grow. We had Dean and Lucas like 2009-ish, 7 to 9. And I really began to realize that I was gonna need a business, somebody to take care of the business,
right?
Because I knew what my job was. My job was to continue doing this ice cream that nobody else knows how to do. We make ice cream differently than everybody else. We don't use stabilizers, emulsifiers, egg yolks, corn syrup. We work with milk protein. I actually learned this by working at the dairy. That the way you pasteurize and homogenize can build texture in the ice cream and body. And so we do that, and it's not easy. And like, so I knew that my role was in that ice cream, thinking like a molecule, doing the sort of understanding customers, building community, creating flavors, all of that stuff. And I needed somebody, because this was going to be a very complex business. I needed somebody who could come in and organize the business. And so that was 2009. That was when I another moment in my life, great moment of luck. I happened to, know this guy, John Lowe, who was our old drinking buddy. He was the only guy I knew that wore cufflinks, but he would come in after he was a junior lawyer at a law firm back in the 90s. And
I think I read he was at General Electric. Is that right?
Yeah. So he went on as I was building my stuff, and also Charlie, who's now my husband, but at the time my boyfriend, who was also my business partner when we started Jeni's. But like, we would all three of us meet up after I closed the ice cream shop. Charlie was still working at Ohio Link, or at OCLC, which is an online library thing, and then John would meet us, and we'd all probably get super shit faced, saving the world or whatever. But like, he went on to have an incredible career, and at GE, and he was just shot up to the top of that company, GE Aviation, and somehow, and that's a whole story. I mean, hopefully he'll put it in his book. He decided to come work. I asked him. I was like, "You're the only guy I know who is a pit bull, obviously understands business deeply, and is a community spirited leader." And so I knew it had to be him. And anyway, that's another great moment of luck for me.
I'm curious, because I know it's not a very sexy topic, but we talk about like selling online and shipping across state lines or whatever. I mean, that entire process of the supply chain, the operations. I mean, it's not fun. I mean, it's a lot of work. And it's a completely different business than making ice cream and selling it to customers at your store. Were you ever involved with that, or is that something that John got involved with later on?
Very much. I mean, we've been very scrappy. Only in the last couple of years have we gotten amazing,
like co-packer,
a
process
facility,
an incredible team of leaders.
Yeah.
Who've done this at other companies, right? So we were very scrappy about all of this, just doing it kind of fly by the seat of our pants. A lot of our work crossed over, but I know that if you want to make really beautiful ice cream, you have to be really good at moving it around. You have to be really good at picking up the strawberries and then making the strawberries into something before they go bad in a day. The strawberries that we work with have a 1-day shelf life. They're not from Argentina or whatever. They're not built for that. They're built for flavor. And they're grown very close to us. And so when you want to move 6,000 pounds of them and, wrestle them into ice cream, it's a process of figuring out how to do that. And so John and I would work together on that, but like, and also with people we would bring in with different levels of expertise. But over time, it's like, you bring in the person you can afford, they advance it a little bit. You just keep kind of doing that. And then they move on and you get somebody else and you just keep kind of advancing it and learning as we go as well. But always with the idea. I mean, failed at this so much. But I can tell you now that like, we talk about that sort of flywheel feeling now. I mean, people write about it all the time in business. And like, I really understand that because for most of my life, and John's at the business too, and everybody who's worked there for any more than, more than 2 or 3 years, like it was about like figuring stuff out and like nothing was ever really going right. If one thing was going really well, 10 other things were falling apart, and like you're back behind the scenes, like trying to figure all this stuff out and do it as best you can and whatever. And like, of course, create the best experience for customers we possibly can and like our team and all of that stuff. And only recently are we beginning to feel that feeling of like, man, all of that effort was worth it. Because if we had just read a book on how to do it, it probably wasn't enough. We had to figure it out on our own. We did. Sure. We now have great leaders in those worlds. We have this stuff ironed out. We have our supplier network, our farmers, we've got long relationships with people. We've got all this stuff ironed out so that like it really does feel like, wow.
Yeah.
Like we almost can't, one of us or one thing isn't going to mess this up.
I'm sure you've talked about this a lot, but there was this moment again, this word moment. I think like this whole podcast is about moments, where there was a pint of ice cream that, there was that situation of listeria that was found or whatnot. I can't remember the year. What was it? A few years ago?
2015.
2015. You won't forget.
I'll never forget it.
Yeah. I mean, just talk us through what was going through your mind. I mean, I can't imagine, but what was happening?
Well, we were in another meeting, and I saw John get the call or, get the message.
John
and
was a CEO or?
CEO, yep. Yeah. And I saw his face like drain of blood. Like I saw an expression that I had never seen on him before. And so I left the meeting too and went and figured it out. And it was, it's the call you don't want to get. And what we didn't know, we did know that it tested positive. So we knew it was there. What we didn't know is where else it was. And so then we had to make some very quick decisions, like knowing that we were, not knowing very much about it, knowing that we had passed with flying colors all of our, permitting and all of our licensing, and we did in-house testing. We'd done all this stuff, and everything was great. We had just gone through several third-party audits because we had this other project, and we were doing great, but we just still didn't know, how widespread this was going to be. And so within several hours, I mean, we stayed up all night, stayed at the office all night. Maybe even for 2 nights, I don't even remember now. And we decided a plan. We decided that what we were going to need to do is just recall everything. And that was just for absolute safety. Because if we were going to, just recall that flavor or bring some of it back and start testing it. They take like 72 hours at that time to get tests back. I think they've changed that now. It's gotten a little bit faster, but you know what I mean? Like you could start testing things and just drag this out forever. Meanwhile, like somebody could get hurt.
And that included your stores,
Oh, it included
also
closing our stores. We had just opened in
products.
LA. It was the worst timing.
Oh, you closed your stores down too?
We closed all the stores down. We took all of the ice cream back. We had no ice cream to sell, and we had nowhere to make it. And so we did all of this knowing that it could be the end of our company. I mean, but with the intention of preventing an outbreak. And we did. We prevented an outbreak. And I think that what ended up happening is that we gained so much trust in making that decision, even though and I don't fault anybody for it because it's a hard thing to understand. The media didn't quite get it right. I mean, some people even called it an outbreak, which it wasn't. Mm-hmm. But even with all of that, we were just transparent about it. And we did our best to get back on our feet. It took a long time. It was not easy. Yeah. But we learned so much about our company. And I just would say, like, to anybody going through some kind of a crisis, sometimes it can be the best thing that happens to you. And I think, there's like stress and there's multiple layers of that. There's like crisis and then there's like tragedy, and it's not tragedy. So I knew where I was in the crisis place, but crisis is real tough. I mean, you've got a new future in front of you. You've got to figure out new ways. And so that was
curious
where
with
we
you
were
though, because it seems like I know moment, the word moment is a common theme here, but so is like resilience. And it sounds like, in so many stages of your life, you've had to be resilient and so I guess, how do you approach those moments or those times where like, how do you compartmentalize the tough parts of it with being optimistic of what's to come and like going back at it. Like, do you have some sort of strategy or a way that you can point?
Well, this would have been the third time that I would say that in my life I lost everything or really had the chance of not that was sort of how I was sort of envisioning it. And so I was, but at the same time, it was like I had never been I had children at this point in my life. I had never been in this personally as this, and of course we have all of these employees, and so it felt just so much bigger. And so, but what I did was I started keeping a journal, and so I was writing through it. I was getting outside of myself, looking in, because I had no hope. Like hope is ideas. I had no ideas because we had just come out of winter. We're on fumes. We have no money. I mean, none. No way of getting more loans either. And no ice cream. So we have nothing to sell and no kitchen to make it. So, because we have to still figure out where it's coming from. We have to solve this problem where it's coming from, and that could take a couple more months.
I think most people in these situations would close their doors and probably not open again. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my journal entry, I was like, look, I just explained how I felt, which was I felt like I was standing floating in a sort of vast sort of nothing. There was nowhere to take a step backward or forward. There was nothing to grab onto. And in my journal, I remember saying, like, I know that an idea is going to float by me at some point. I'm going to grab onto it, like it's and it's going to take me somewhere. And it did eventually. And what it was so this is where the crisis can be good for you. You have to focus on. You have to know who you are deeply, because there's some things that you just will never change no matter what. That'll blow you up. So knowing what those are for us was important. And so I got a call from, I started getting calls actually from a lot of ice cream companies. Let us help you. Come make your ice cream here, which was the coolest thing to experience. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, no way, because if we don't make our ice creams, like, we're not us. And then I started thinking, well, what are we? Like, well, we're like, we know how to make ice cream. I know how to make ice cream. I know ice cream more than almost anybody else in the entire world. Maybe there are 10 more people in the world who know more ice cream than I do. Yeah. We are a community of makers, growers, and producers. Do I care what freezer, like, if it's in my freezer or their freezer? I have to train people in my kitchen, or I train people in their kitchen, right? What's the difference? Yeah. And that changed everything for me. So then I was like, okay, so then we started working with a 5th generation dairy who was already sourcing our dairy, like grass pastured dairy for us. And they had better equipment than we did anyway. So then we're sending teams down there. We're making stuff. We had another kitchen. We're making like marshmallows and chocolate base and all these things in our kitchen, just taking it over there and freezing it. And it ended up being, the ice cream was like way better, like, because now we don't have to package it and send it to our kitchen. The dairy can come directly from the farm to the ice cream, to the place where we're freezing it. Anyway, it ended up being a whole great thing. But that idea of like killing your babies, shedding the things you never think. Sometimes you won't let things go unless you really, really have to. How do you get to that place without crisis? I don't know if it's possible. You'd never wish it on your worst enemies, and at the same time, it's the best thing that happened to us.
That's insane. How has the company been since that time?
Better than ever. We first of all we created just an incredible safety program. We test every ice cream that goes out. That's like unheard of in the industry, like every single batch. But we also have, we're busier than ever. We've never had bigger. Every time we open a store, it's like our busiest opening. We just opened in Alexandria, Virginia, a beautiful, beautiful community, an old American community. And it was 18 degrees out, and it was our biggest opening.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, since like when you first launched Jeni's, since then, obviously a lot of other ice cream companies and brands have come into the space, whether it's physical locations or selling in stores. What do you think about, what is it about Jeni's? I don't know if it's the product, if it's the company, if it's you, like the brand. What is it about Jeni's that has standed the test of time and been able to really continue to grow and grow and grow while there are all these other brands coming into the market? Well,
I will say that I think at first glance we're a culinary company, but when you really get into it, we never wanted to make ice cream not fun. You know what I mean? Take the fun out of ice cream. We always wanted to make it sort of like, it's not highbrow. Do you know what I mean? And I think that at first glance, and when you see my cookbook, and I got the James Beard Award and all that, and I really do take a culinary approach to a lot of it. I mean, the way that we do strawberries, the way it comes from the chef's kitchen. But we never wanted it to feel foodie or fancy or like the fancy ice cream.
The bourgeoisie's ice cream.
Totally. I mean, ice cream has to be this place for everyone, and to get to know other people better, and a place where, we wanted it to be like just really sort of that idea of flavor is character and whatever. And I think that has been so important in how we our success versus even people who've come in after us, kind of in our model. I mean, even a lot of the ice cream makers who come in will say we're directly inspired by Jeni and what in that Jeni's ice creams. Like, and I still sort of, I think that one of the things that differentiates us, because I think there's this trend of artisan and almost it's become a monster. It's almost like too fancy. Yeah. And I think that I think that at first glance, it's sort of, you see, it seems like what we're doing, but we're really not. I mean, we're just really trying to make this chocolate that just makes you just melt. You know what I mean? And like, it's really about that. It's about how beautiful the ingredients are and that they're connected to human beings and that, there's a story here. And then the other thing is that we've been at this for so long. We've been building community for so long that we have direct and personal relationships so all over the country. And that's really, really important.
I can't imagine anyone better than you to talk about entrepreneurship. I mean, you've literally only been an entrepreneur for the last decade and a half,
my whole
or
life.
2 decades and a half. I mean, people have ideas all the time. We've talked to hundreds of founders, and they've all had multiple ideas and have built multiple businesses and had success and failure and whatnot. For the people out there that are listening that have ideas or an idea or a passion, what is a tangible piece of advice that you can give them?
Start small and build. I just don't think that is out there very often. And people don't hear that. We hear, I think, kids think entrepreneurship is like strapping yourself to a rocket. It's like winning the lottery. And you're going to get a fancy car and you're going to get billions of dollars, or you're just not going to. You're going to fail. Your idea is going to fail. And I think that there's a whole other side of entrepreneurship, which is just start making something and tweak as you go. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to learn. In fact, it shouldn't be perfect because you're going to learn from customers. Thousands of people are going to help you understand how to make what you're going to make. So start now and just build slowly. I just think that that's the way to go. I always say that I come from the Roald Dahl school of entrepreneurship. It's like that Willy Wonka, build it into a world that means something. And so that to me is values based. It's like your world has to mean something when people walk in, whatever it is that you're making, even if you're like an accounting firm, it has to mean something, and it always is based on trust and, but I think just start doing something.
I think one of the reasons for that too is like a lot of entrepreneurs think so big where and they lack the patience to know that it's going to take time and you have to, if you don't start somewhere that is not easy to start but like possible at that moment, then you'll probably never end up doing it. Right?
Yeah. And I think I look back when I was younger and I was so worried about competitors, people stealing ideas or whatever. And I meet young emerging entrepreneurs all the time. They're very worried about people taking their ideas. It is so much harder than that. Yeah. It is so much more about the process and people. And that is where the magic is. Focus on that. And then I think for vision, the moonshot vision, the long vision.
It's good to have that
because
for sure,
the super long vision is best because everything between now and then is going to be a jumbled mess. But you will inch your way slowly to that vision. Just keep it always in your scope, way out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you'll continue to do Jeni's for the rest of your life, or do you think that there will be other entrepreneurial ventures in the near future or future that you tackle?
I think I will do Jeni's for a long time. And then, at that
Has
point,
your name on it.
I think I'll always be associated with that, but I will also work to get other people, especially I would like kids to have the lens of entrepreneurship by 6th grade. And that's that lens of community, creativity, curiosity.
Which is 12 years old.
Opportunity. Yeah, exactly.
You should call the company 12 years old.
Yeah, I want
12.
that. I want every kid to have that because whatever you end up doing, whether it's skateboarding or you become a science kid or an art kid or whatever, you can apply that, or you become a surgeon in your life. If you've got that in you, you apply it everywhere you go.
Right.
So I think I'll work a little bit on that. And if I ever have another business idea, it'll start tiny. It'll just be me tinkering in my garage. It won't be me pitching.
Venture funded.
I'm not going to be on Shark Tank. I just don't like that kind of world. It works for certain businesses, but I think for a lot of businesses, I don't think that you need that kind of fanfare around. I think you could just start something.
Well, this has been so fun. I mean, like, just again, going back to just hearing your story from day one and that resilience factor is crazy because I feel like just putting myself in those shoes, I can't imagine like what you're thinking and going through every single time. Like you have this passion, right, for ice cream, and I feel like it's one of those passions that a lot of people might have for something, but they don't really think of it as their career. It's like I enjoy doing this, but I'm gonna go do this as my career because I guess it pays the most money or puts me in the most comfortable position. But you had this thing where there wasn't a clear career path, but you just kept going back at it. So it's amazing to see where you've come, and we can't wait to see where things go from here. So
Well,
thanks
it's
for
something
being on
about
the show.
being in the American, that those values as an American of like making something, putting your name on it. There's something about that I grew up with that I just really take to heart. Freedom, not having to work for someone else.
Totally. I love
100%.
it. Well, thank you so much, Jeni, and we can't wait to see how much bigger Jeni's gets and what you do and what you do to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. I mean, before the podcast started, we talked a lot about the women the women entrepreneurs specifically in LA and across the country, and that's something that we hope to also be a part of, is really inspiring younger men and women to really get behind their dreams. Like, no one else is going to make it happen except for them.
I think that entrepreneurship is the fastest way to make social change. I mean, I really do.
Yeah.
I believe that. I've built nonprofits as well, and so I really think that it's an important world, and small or big business, little, tiny, all the way up. So
couldn't agree more.
Super.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.